On today's episode of SaaSOps Live virtual event.
There's no clear set of criteria across all sectors or everywhere in the world. So each company is doing its own thing and then putting it on their website, and that's what you should take as truth.
So what do we know about the sustainable impact of like cheap short-term electronics? Like it seems like they're everywhere,
stuff.
Right? Like you can buy.
Sorry, is my dog destroying something right now? I'm not sure.
To the cloud. So welcome to Solve episode 21. We can now legally drink in North America, but no drinking this afternoon. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, other times in other places. Here it is Earth Week. But should that not really be Earth all the time? Why are we thinking about Earth just for 1 week out of the year? But we would like to think more about being SaaS sustainable and sustainability. SaaS sustainability, as it says across the bottom of the screen, if we can fix that in post-production, people. So we have Marie and Dominic from 22D Consulting here to talk about how we, as IT professionals, can be more informed and make better choices to be greener in the SaaS providers and companies that we use. So over to you, Dominic and Marie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marita John. My pronouns are she, her, and I work at 22D Consulting. And for those who may not know, is a tech consultancy specialized in Google Workspace consulting. We operate mostly in the DACH region, in the US and UK and Ireland. And I work with Dominic, who is here and who you probably all know. Can you all see the slides at all or not really?
They've just come in.
Yeah. Amazing. So I wear many hats at 22D, including the one of climate officer, because I'm currently studying for my master's in environmental technology. And so today I will be kind of introducing the topic of sustainability in SaaS. A little disclaimer, this is my first time. Can we go back to the previous slide, please, Dominic, if you don't mind? A little disclaimer, this is my first time ever doing a presentation like this. And I am no expert. You kind of should see this presentation as a conversation starter and touching on the surface of sustainability in SaaS. And so what I did is I compiled some of the recent research and data on the topic. I mostly focus on US-based content because most of the people here are based in the US. And I have a list of the references and the literature I have, so I can send that to you if you're interested later. And I also really wanted to thank you all for joining, and thank you, Colin, for having me. As part of my job, I watch all Solve episodes, so I know who most of you are, and I'm very impressed by all of you. You're all so impressive and talented, so I'm very honored to be here and slightly intimidated, if I'm being very honest. And so before I start, I'm going to try to take over this and make you do a little quiz. No pressure if you don't want to participate, but if you do, can you open a new, can we go back to the previous slide? Because I can't share my screen with just a presentation and have a look at my notes. I'm gonna have a lot of very awkward, can we please go to the next slide? So I'm very sorry for that. So I'm gonna take over. Yes, oh no, I cannot. Can I let you go, Dominic, for a second? Can you let the screen go? Amazing. And then I should be able to share my screen. Let's go. Share. Okay. So there you go. Okay, people are responding. Data centers currently represent what percentage of global emissions? I can see, I've never used this before, but this is quite cool. We can see how many people are responding in real time, which is really cool. Are we gonna get there? 4 people, 2 more people wanna, I think we're capped at 7. I did pay to not be capped at 7, so we'll see what happens. But I think we're capped at 7, sadly. So the answer is actually 2% of global emissions.
Wow.
Yeah. By the way, if you want to ask questions or interrupt anytime, please feel free to do so, honestly. So 2%, no one has that answer. Well, someone now does. Oh yeah, it's not capped at 7 people anymore. Amazing. So next, Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Malaysia, Sweden, Poland, or Australia. Gonna let people answer. Here we go, getting there. Okay, as of now, I checked literally today again, the correct answer is Sweden. All the other countries consume more electricity, but if, well, Bitcoin was a country, it would be within the first like 10 or 15 most electricity consuming countries, which is pretty insane. Then we have the global footprint of the tech industry was similar to the aviation industry in 2020. Is that true or false? 2 people. Here we go. 5 people. I really like the live, kind of seeing people responding live. It's quite cool. And the correct answer is very sadly true. I think it was up to it was around 2% of global emissions, which is quite scary. And the last one I have is, what percentage of women currently occupy cloud computing roles globally? I'm going to let you all answer this. Okay, so the correct answer is 12. It's a bit better than 5, but it's not amazing, not gonna lie. So I'm gonna stop sharing now and ask Dominic to take over again, if they don't mind. Yes, amazing, this is working, great. So these questions, could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. These questions all relate to the 3 elements of sustainable development, namely environment, society, and economy. So in the kind of standard definition of sustainable development was kind of given by the Brundtland Report by the United Nations in 1987. And it states that sustainable development seeks to reconcile economic development with the protection of social and environmental balance. And it's a definition that has been used a lot over businesses, organizations, and worldwide. It is limited in some ways, but for the specificities of this presentation, I'm going to use it for the rest of that presentation. And why should we care about sustainable development? Because we are in the middle of a climate crisis. This is a really fun part of my presentation, but just a little reminder. Rising temperatures are currently fueling environmental degradation, natural disasters, weather extremes, food and water insecurity, economic disruption, conflict, and tourism. Sea levels are rising, the Arctic is melting, coral reefs are dying, and the oceans are acidifying, and forests are burning, which is all very, very fun. And business as usual is not currently good enough. We need bold action across all sectors, which includes the tech industry and the SaaS sector. So without further ado, I will kind of go through the 3 elements of sustainable development: environment, social, and economy, and kind of look at both issues and opportunities for the SaaS sector. So can we go back to there? Great. So at the moment, you can see on those graphs that a few things on this slide. First of all, that training a single neural network model today can emit as much carbon as 5 cars in their lifetime. That kind of gives you an idea of how much energy is used by those processes, which is both scary and just very interesting, because sometimes it can be hard to kind of quantify things you can't see. In terms of energy forecasting for 2030, the networks, both wireless and wired, energy consumption is kind of set to increase greatly in the next few years, which means that we need bold and urgent action. And to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreements, the ICT industry in general, we need to reduce carbon emission by 45% in the next 10 years, which clearly calls for more efforts. And so when we talk about this, can we get to the next slide, please? We kind of can see that there's a lot of focus on data centers and optimizing hardware. And one thing that there's a lot of discussion around is switching to greener cloud providers, which is a really great start. And another great avenue for energy efficiency is to make sure that your software is greener. And so the environmental footprint of digital products and services goes from the choices from the beginning till the end. So the choices made during the creation of products and services, data transfers, end user interactions, and end-of-life practices. And that includes what happens to your hardware after, because e-waste is also a big problem. And so if we go to the next slide, please. In terms of opportunities, so you have both energy efficiency and greener software. And this is the part that I get very interested about. I am not a cloud engineer, so maybe hold off on the too technical questions, or I would just send you a lot of really interesting articles after. But software can be a key part of a company's sustainability strategy, because you can include energy efficiency in the assessment of the performance of your software. You can have a look at which alternatives would be more energy efficient, especially when you're carrying or testing out updates. And overall, there's a growing number of tools for developers to manage energy consumption. And green software in general is still an emerging field, and it has mostly kind of been talked about in academia. And we're kind of waiting for a shift towards more impact in industry as well. And so things that I was very interested in when I was reading was just using newer application architectures, such as serverless computing or function as a service, would enable more control over capacity and by extension in energy consumption, which is very interesting. And so basically, like, my main takeaway from this is that you making sure that you have cloud providers that are more that are actually using greener energy is very important, and that improving your code and software would be very beneficial on a range of levels. First of all, it means your applications are better, faster, easier to use, a better user experience, and therefore you use less energy. So it's kind of an all-win situation, and that doesn't really happen when we talk about environmental stuff. So it's quite nice to see that better user experience, faster processes also means better environmental impact. That's something that I really like. Can we go to the next slide and have a look at the social impact? So there's so much knowledge and data on the fact that the tech industry in general is not very diverse. It's mostly dominated by white males across the board, and there's a need for a more diverse and inclusive SaaS industry specifically. And the reason for that is that the lack of diversity in the tech industry has implications for justice and fairness, but it also has implications in terms of the products that comes out of that. And if you look at this slide, you can see that for both cloud providers present here, Google and Microsoft, the number of, for instance, Black workers in big tech are extremely low, and they're not really increasing over the years. So there are issues here. You can see that, for instance, Amazon reported an 11% jump, but the majority of employee work in distribution centers. So it's kind of difficult to compare with their other tech peers. And if we look at gender, for instance, which is another indicator, can we go to the next slide, please? Yes, there are gender gaps in SaaS industry and tech industry in general, and COVID-19 has only increased those. If you look cloud computing, you have an extremely tiny female representation currently in jobs. Currently, the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report of 2020 kind of identified that at the moment, data and AR roles are occupied by 26% women, engineering roles 15%, cloud computing roles, as we had a look at during that little quiz, 12%, are occupied by women. So those numbers are very low, and there hasn't been that much improvement recently. And so I just looked at two ways in which this industry lacked diversity, but there are others as well. And if we look at solutions, next slide, please. Yes, some potential solutions that have been identified are issues related to talent retention. More than 50% of women leave their tech employers, and often the tech industry altogether, in the middle of their career path. So there's a clear need to create inclusive work environments. Also a need to close the skills gap with efficient training and learning for employees to be able to upskills, and for people from that more diverse background to be also able to have those skills. And once they have those skills, they need to be able to be hired and to be able to to be paid appropriately, because there's a clear pay gap across all jobs. And there's a need for more inclusive business programs that would allow for more internal support regardless of role. Can we go to the next element, which is economy? The economy pillar of sustainable development is also usually called governance. And basically the idea here is that there are clear ecological limits constraining economic growth, and that we need company targets that are science-based and not set by the companies themselves, and that match planetary boundaries. And in general, there are issues with sustainability reporting, which makes it really hard for SaaS companies and companies in general to really assess their impact. And so for that, and we need more global standards in compliance. There's also a lack of transparency from the big cloud providers and other companies on exactly their processes and their environmental impact. And that lack of transparency doesn't allow for proper action to be taken. Another very interesting thing as well is there's a lot of debate around efficiency. So what we have seen earlier in the slides is that there's also, for the environmental aspect of SaaS, specifically cloud computing, there's a lot of saying around the fact that going from on-prem to cloud computing would be a lot more sustainable. And if generally, in most cases, it can be, the thing is, because the use of cloud computing has completely skyrocketed over the recent years, in terms of environmental impact, it has increased. And so we need to kind of be aware of those like rebound effects. And finally, we overall need more tech regulation and the inclusion of Green New Deals in policymaking. And I think across the world, people are discussing the Green New Deal a lot, and it's great because it helps to have better like standards for everything people do. Can I have the next slide, please? This is still as awkward. 10 minutes in, this is great. So overall, sustainability in SaaS, what areas for improvement include? Green hosting is a big thing and should be something that everyone should consider. And again, better performance of your software means also a better environmental impact, which is pretty amazing. Whatever tech you're using also should be easy to use for your users. So when your users use your products, if they can find their way around quicker, it will have a better impact as well. Usability, in terms that helps for both social and environmental aspects, because there is a sense of fairness in making sure that a wide range of people can use and be empowered by technology. And we need also a shift from shareholder to stakeholder mindset to make sure that the impact of technology and software is considering all people that may be affected by it, all stakeholders, from people to planet. And finally, we need better business practices to make sure that those things are followed through. So this is kind of the end of what I was going to say. Can we get to the next slide, please? So Now, if we talk about 22D a little bit, I have some quick action points for you. And these are things that we at 22D do or are doing. One of them is joining the climateaction.tech Slack community. You all love a good Slack community, so join this one as well. It's really great, and there's a lot of discussion, a lot of collaboration happening. And then I'm also encouraging you to learn more Pesto and signing the Sustainable Service by 2024 petition, which is trying to kind of put pressure on the biggest cloud providers to make sure that they use renewable energy. And finally, considering joining Leaders for Climate Action.earth, which is a network of leaders from different companies, mostly around Europe at the moment, but they are expanding worldwide, that are committing to climate action, which also include 22D. And I think that's a segue into what we are doing. So usually people present themselves and then properly present their company, but here I kind of switch things around because we are trying at 22D to, if I can get the next slide, so my what I'm saying makes a lot more sense, is that our kind of like, we are trying, whenever we make choices, whatever they are, to include those sustainability elements at 22D, and it's very much part of our DNA, because I don't know if you know this, but 22D stands for the 22nd century, because the overall idea and vision is that we want to make sure our customers can work together collaboratively to the next century. And for that, it's a deliverable future. And so we need to make sure we include all stakeholders. And for the vision part, I'm going to ask Dominic to jump in.
Yeah, as the founder, and I'm going to stop sharing you now, because then I can see more people, which I enjoy much more. As the founder of 22D, I'm set out to build a sustainable or a livable 22nd century, and that covers all those parts that we talked about. It covers all stakeholders in that I touch, that the company is touching, that the communities we are in touching, that they have a equitable and sustainable environment to work in, that they can go outside and breathe, which is something that's coming up over the next couple of months in California, for example, where with the fires, that issue is coming up as well, which it also includes, that the company is still here in 100 years. So that's the sustainable business part as well, and that's the those are our core values, to really think these 100 years ahead and then share as much as possible to make people to get greener, I guess, and are able to adopt those purposes within their companies, within their projects. We just came off of a meeting with the recently acquired Cloud Ready, or a company name was Neverwhere, that allows to have to expand the lifespan of an old Windows machine by another 3 or 4 years within your company. So and still give some good performance to whatever you need. And all of those initiatives that we initiate in our customers that have much more impact than if we would just do it within ourselves is so much important of what we're trying to do. So those are, that's the idea we're doing here.
Vision part. And one thing that Dominic's not mentioning, but I think it's more appropriate for me to mention it, and they don't know I'm about to do that, is that also having a very safe and nice work environment. Dominic is an amazing manager, and I feel both safe to be vulnerable and also safe to be challenged, which is really great. And I think that really helps with both with everything, basically. So that's kind of like the introduction, very simple introduction to sustainability in SaaS. And so this is kind of your opportunity to also talk. I know that most of you are in way bigger company than we are. We are a remote first and only company. We are very small and tiny, and we have less power over people and less constraints as well. So I think it would be great to hear from all of you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Marie and Dominic, for your presentation and joining us today. I know it's late in your evening out there in Germany. I've been thankful for Dominic to be joining us for the the last year on his Friday evenings from sometimes from the ski slopes, and joining these conversations. So, while this was happening, I can see there was some chat and going through and questions being raised. So I wanted to open the floor and see if anybody had a specific question or statement. Where are you on? Who's not thinking about sustainable SaaS? Is it or who's forward thinking and already has it part of your RFP process? I know some of the previous episodes, Dominic has mentioned about, when we are choosing a vendor, it's asking which platform they're built on. Is the service that we're choosing, utilizing an environmentally responsible cloud provider? We don't have that in our RFPs when we were looking for SaaS companies to take their products from, but certainly something that I'll look for in the future.
So I'm going to put this to Rose and ask if Rose updated, if you updated the spreadsheet you shared like a year ago or something.
Oh, yeah. So I think the spreadsheet I shared so Portland is a very sort of sustainable minded city. I will say for their part, they are definitely more of an individual impact kind of mind, like much of the US. And that was actually one of the more difficult things. So I was on the sustainability committee at one of our subsidiary companies before I moved up to the parent. And we did some projects where we actually tried to measure our carbon impact. And just the exercise of doing that made us understand, because I was the only IT person doing it, but it made us understand like how really much we don't know from the vendors and the people that we work with all the time. So we eventually had to limit the scope to just like commuting, like measuring this is the environmental impact of our commutes, which in the remote workforce is literally nothing. And so, but I will say during that time, we were partially remote. And so what we did is we assigned a value to how much more energy you would use at home versus in the office. Because the fun part about that particular subsidiary is that the building that they are in is carbon neutral. Like they work in a building that has been retrofitted and like has a lot of fancy things to make sure that it is creating as much energy as it is using, and they do a lot of like energy savings and things like that. But people don't have that in their homes usually. So we had to kind of adjust for the impact there. I will say it has occurred to me on occasion, especially through conversations with you, Dominic, that we need to be asking the question of our SaaS vendors, or preferably they would be presenting us with the information that we needed in order to measure the environmental impact of a particular vendor. That said, I think we are barely getting started, if at all, on that front. Because I don't know that any of the major like best in breed vendors that we talk about has like easily accessible published information about their environmental impact, like on their website.
Rose, they don't know.
Or independently audited.
They don't.
A lot of them
And
don't know.
exactly, like it goes, like Marie was talking about, it goes all the way back to the cloud providers. Like they can't even measure their own impact, right? If I can't measure my impact, they can't measure their impact. it's up to really like the people who are providing the backbone services.
And there are also clear issues with kind of sustainability accounting. There's no clear set of criteria across all sectors or everywhere in the world. So each company is doing its own thing and then putting it on their website, and that's what you should take as truth. And so there's no way to kind of compare, and what we're hoping is perhaps to get to the same level of accuracy that you get for financial accounting, where you know the standards, you know what you're comparing companies on. But if each company is doing its own thing, you can't compare. So I think that's also a big thing that we're waiting on a bigger level and like more governmental.
I don't know how this contrasts with how the cloud providers operate in the rest of the world, but also like there's only three really. I mean, not only three, but Amazon, Azure, and Google, and the US doesn't really have, like, to your point, any sort of laws that would set how the level of transparency that these companies are supposed to provide. And so it kind of feels like even it's tough to invest in not only those, because you're just kind of choosing the lesser of three evils. Although Google is probably arguably the best at those. But then if you try to take, I know, Dominic, you mentioned a couple of companies that like I guess you put in like what your cloud usage is and they kind of produce a carbon offset. If I'm understanding it right, but it also feels it's just like this like one big capitalist adventure, and like how for those companies those companies also are not necessarily, I mean, they're transparent, but you're not comparing them all on the same playing field. It kind of feels like where to start, especially when especially for tech companies, sustainability is not necessarily the highest priority at a company level.
We don't burn oil. That's the thing. So we can't be bad. That's often a thing that I hear. But of course we burn oil, or we most likely burn coal, which is worse. So.
Well, I mean, we have seen some like interesting innovations, right? So like I know that Microsoft has like underwater data centers in order to try and like reduce the amount of energy they're spending on cooling. But, you know, I feel like every change like that has sort of a different, you go back to middle school, energy is neither created nor destroyed. And so if you're using an underwater data center to keep your data center cool, that heat has to go somewhere. So in theory, it's going into the water. So are we heating up our oceans by putting our data centers in our oceans? But yeah, so I feel like every approach to sustainability has its own considerations, right? Like solar power has its own considerations versus like heat venting, like they use sometimes in Hawaii and other like volcanic regions, versus like wind power and water, and like, yeah, each one has its own stuff. Like we know that coal is bad and oil is bad, but you know, like
stick is back.
Yeah, like even like the metals that we're mining to make our technology components are not like, those are a natural resource. So.
And they're often made by kids as well, which is another debate. But I think that's also another thing with a lot of hardware. It's really hard to trace because our supply chain have gotten so global and interconnected that some of the batteries, for instance, are mined in ways that are very unsustainable, and there's some modern slavery elements also included. So it's a bit of a mess. But it's also a thing where if you kind of engage in those discussions, it's all about engaging the discussions, as Brian was saying a bit earlier as well, to kind of engage in discussions. That's where you can start to have, both with your vendors and anyone you're collaborating with, to see like how you could make it better, and discussing it is a first step usually.
One thing that I was struck by in your presentation was about the mention of thinking about efficiency in the designing of your code, because back in the day, if something was running slowly, you just spin up another instance, or add more RAM, add more CPU, not really thinking about the additional resources that are going to take to run that. So it would be, and I'm hoping that companies realize and that are building products that is the better way to go, is to make, to be writing more efficient code and having more efficient VMs and Kubernetes whatevers than just spinning up multiple ones.
It also saves you money.
I will share that in the last couple of weeks, we have actually been able to shut down 2 legacy SANs inside our data center. And when we did them, one of our engineers did comment that the amount of electricity we would now be saving as we had this stuff off. So we have been trying to reduce our footprint inside our data center, only to make things easier for ourselves and put stuff in GCP and other cloud providers. But yeah, it is something that should always be thought about. And just also to say with Dominic about the neverware, it is great that laptops do have a life after their corporate life. They normally are in service for sort of 3 years, because that's generally the 3-year warranty that you get. And companies, I'm sure everybody is the same. Every employee wants a new laptop or to get something shinier and faster every few years. But it's good that with something like Neverware and Chrome OS, they can go on and live in a community center, in education. I think the build quality of some of these machines, if I don't break it, I might never, I should never be upgrading my laptop. A laptop could last for 10 years with Mac OS or Windows 10 and then Chrome OS on it afterwards if it was getting really slowed down. I think I would like to see that a big change with holding onto devices and not having that constant replace and upgrade mentality that we all have. Certainly with cell phones, which is a huge, consumer problem.
What are your thoughts on right to repair? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, right to repair is a big impact. Brian, go.
I was just going to say, I think, it's definitely not in the US, but in Europe, I think it's maybe Germany or some other country passed some right to repair legislation recently, to mostly targeted at probably like Apple. But what kinds of impact do you see that having in the sustainability of keeping equipment around longer?
That's a Marie question.
It's actually in France, right to repair laws.
Oh, there we go.
And it's so cool. I love it. I got very excited about it. I think it's great. I've seen, I don't know, it's a very stupid example, but I've seen in my hometown Paris, I've seen more and more tech repair shops opening up. And it's just really cool. And they create communities where you can come in and learn how to repair as well. So it's not a thing where you're asking someone to do it, is you actually do a course where you repair your own tech, and then you can come back home with all that knowledge. But what was your question again? Because I think I got very excited and didn't respond to anything you were asking. Sorry.
I think to Colin's point about keeping devices around longer, there's a lot of factors that play into sustainability besides just like carbon footprint and things like that. But carbon footprint is part of it. If you don't throw away your old device, you don't have to buy a new one, and then a manufacturer doesn't have to make a new one. And I think even though, caveat, I used to work for Apple, but I do think, generally speaking, Apple devices are really well made. People joke there's the tax, it slows down every year. People tend to throw it away because they just want a new one because of the hype, or it's shiny or a little bit, 5% faster. But if we could keep devices like older cell phones, older computers in circulation longer, that would hopefully have an impact on things like manufacturing emissions and resource usage.
Right. my secondary iPhone 5S that I keep around for UK SIM card support and some testing is iOS 12, but it's still got a security update like last month. And I've never seen that with an Android.
Oh yeah, I mean, as
two versions,
I mean,
two major versions behind the primary release. So it's really, I feel like they're doing the best one there too.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
terrible that sorry to interrupt, Brian, the Pixel 2, I'm heading up here, but it's disappearing in my virtual background. That's no longer getting updates. It's, now classed as a legacy unsupported product by Google. And it's only the Pixel 2. It's only came out like 3 years ago. It's still a perfectly functionable phone and should get all of the updates that the OS is getting.
Got it.
Oh,
asking Pandora to play some music.
No, Pandora. I didn't ask Google to ask Pandora to play some music. I don't know what's up with my phone. This happens every time. I'm gonna have to lock her in the
So,
safe.
Marie, there is a question in chat that I wanna ask you because Rose asked the question. Probably Rose wanna repeat that, or should I?
Sure. Yeah. My question is like, what do we know about the sustainable impact of like cheap short-term electronics? Like, it seems like they're everywhere, right? Like you can buy headphones for a couple of dollars at the grocery store. But also like, in our industry, like we get them a lot in swag. So like I've gotten battery packs, I've gotten headphones, I've gotten little like Bluetooth gadgets, like wireless chargers. And many of them stop working after a very short period of time because they're pretty cheap. And then I would assume for many people, they get thrown away, not to mention the fact that like swag itself tends to be one of those things that like you over order and then have a bunch left over. So like, I don't know how many like, pens and like those little like cord tacos or like little tiny like swag items that we ordered, 1,000 of and still have 3 years later, like a mountain of them. So I don't know, Marie, if you can speak to that at all.
So I'm not an expert, but the very short summary is that they're absolutely terrible. This is
swag is terrible. We love it, but it's terrible.
And they get a lot of them are getting dumped in the global south in a lot of places, and they cause actual hazards on a lot of levels. So just e-waste is a Pandora box of issues that you open and then you can never kind of put back. They're terrible on all levels, because also one of the very interesting things as well is that it's really hard to recycle because all those parts are kind of together, and it's really hard to kind of take them away and then be able to recycle any elements. So you can't really recycle them. There's too many issues around it, but there's a lot of literature on it. I could send you some, and I'm no expert in this, but yeah, the short story, yeah, it's terrible.
There's also been some horrible socioeconomic stuff with third world countries that are trying to, super, super poor people trying to strip down things to get the rare metals to try and barely afford anything, that just are creating toxic waste dumps. Yeah, awful stuff.
You have kids and stuff playing with things that they shouldn't be playing with, and it's terrible on all levels: health, social, environmental. Yeah, go for it. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say that there's been some, during this pandemic, there's been an interesting development for us that was an unexpected benefit. We as a company concentrate on our offices being in LEED buildings. So being at, the higher certification, the better ones. And that has meant that the air circulation systems have certain levels, certain grades of filtration that has made the office thus safe as far as air filtration for COVID purposes. That's just been an unexpected benefit. So, there's certain things that can come up out of putting that effort into better sustainability and better environment.
Has anybody had a lot of success at arguing for these types of sustainable practices in their own companies?
I tell the company not to order those little stupid tech gadgets because they're always terrible. They don't listen to me all the time though.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say from a swag perspective, we've been pretty successful. It's across the company. There's generally an argument for at least sustainable swag, if not sort of straight up donations rather than swag, particularly for internal stuff. The other thing that we've been doing quite a bit of is looking for refurbished laptops rather than buying net new. And so we see like that varies depending on location as to how possible that is. And actually the past year has put lots of constraint on the supply chain, which means it's harder than it normally is, which may be a net good thing, I guess, because it means less people are giving up their laptops. But yeah, we've seen that certainly as part of what we do.
By the way, you work for ThoughtWorks, Andy,
Yeah.
and some of the articles I've been looking at for green computing are from ThoughtWorks, from some of your colleagues, and they're absolutely amazing. So I just wanted to little shout out. I really enjoyed that.
I did some shameless promoting of some of the stuff they're doing too. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing, while we're shouting out stuff, next week I'm gonna be on with some colleagues of Andy on C2C's Climate Day event on the 22nd, and Marie as well.
Excellent.
Marie, and I'm just gonna sidekick again.
It's interesting to hear that Andy said he was looking at and had got some refurbished devices. I've bought refurbished TVs for our offices back in the day. I say back in the day, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I saw them on Best Buy. It's like, I might as well save $500 a machine. I don't care that it's brand spanking new. I just want it to work, and it likely will. And they have. They've still carried on going. And I know that was one saving we've done. The other thing that we're also very good at in North America and also in the UK is passing on our older hardware laptops, not to a recycling company, but actually to charities. They've gone to local schools, and in the US, certainly in the New York area, we give them to a non-profit, a charity called Laptop Upcycle, laptopupcycle.org, which refits them. They used to put Linux. I think now they actually put Chrome OS on them and give them out to underprivileged families and kids in the area, which has been very important, obviously, in the last year because of everybody working from home and there being strain on devices in people's homes for educational purposes. So that's certainly a very good thing to do.
As a former board member of a nonprofit, we love those. They're free mostly, or often enough, and they're amazing. Usually, if you put in Cloud Ready, it's speedy.
Yeah, because it's like an i5 with 8 or 16 gig of RAM. It's Dell high quality components. They're just sort of 3 or 4 years old. And then even broke ones can be useful for some of these organizations because they train up their volunteers to how to repair them. So in the last few minutes, any closing thoughts, any resolutions, pledges people can make, will think about? How can we make hashtag sustainability more of a trending topic?
You have to talk about
We're
it.
gonna talk about it.
Yes, yeah, and I think it does need to be not Earth Week, but Earth all the time. That's the problem with some of these campaigns. It's just not a flash in the pan, but it's a lot of attention and coverage all at one time. But it's something we should all be reminded of. It's almost like we need a recurring calendar event to remind us to purchase sustainable.
I think it's one of those things where like it has to really reach a critical mass, because like it sucks to be the company who's like, sorry, like we're not going to give swag to our employees because like swag is not sustainable, right? Or like it would suck to be like that, like customer for all of my vendors that would be like, I need you to like present me with this data about like your sustainability practices, right? If nobody else was doing it. And so like it's important for us to like, it's sort of like the SaaSOps movement. It starts with like a whisper, right? Like multiple people whispering kind of in the same direction. And then over time it gains momentum and it becomes a much more acceptable thing and then an expected thing. And that's where
peer pressure is real.
Yeah. That's where we have to get to, is we have to get to the point that thinking about sustainability in pretty much everything we do is expected, because until we reduce the impact that we're having on our planet, the pressure that we're putting on the planet is not going away. So yeah, anyway.
I think we need an open letter to the community and we all sign it.
Open letter to IT or open letter to SaaS?
Or to open letter to SaaS vendors and say, you know, we will pledge that we will, when we are looking for new services, we will prioritize those that are more sustainable and greener than others. And I think if we put it on LinkedIn and try and get other IT executives and leaders to put their name on this document, then it can start getting some traction. And then, you know, the small SaaS companies that are up and coming that we're purchasing and buying services from, and obviously have been on here and maybe have done demos, you know, it can start with them.
Right.
I also think that besides like things that are a little bit more feel good, we need more resources for like the economic proof of this type of stuff. Sorry, is my dog destroying something right now? I'm not sure. What I meant, and by what I mean by that, I mean, you could kind of parallel it a little bit to like diversity and inclusion, because companies say that diversity is a great thing, and then we have pledges and drives and all this stuff. But the only companies that ever change things they change either because of external circumstances, i.e. like what's going on in the world, or because there's data that shows that they make more money if they are more diverse or they are more successful. And I think that that's the type of data that we need for climate and sustainability in general.
Yeah.
Right. Any closing? I'm going to pass back over to Marie and Dominic for a closing thought, statement, conclusion, summary, whatever word fits as we get to the top of the hour.
No pressure. It's just like,
no.
I'll one sentence and then you
on the spot. This is great. No, thank you for thank you for the discussion. This is where it starts, and then having those complicated discussion on every level and making sure that the definition of sustainability is not only environment, because the idea is that it's people and planet, and the only reason we care about the environment is that because they host people and we take care of. So I think it's the idea of also make sure that all people and the planet are both included. This is very important. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening and joining. This is great.
Wow.
never shut up. That's the
That's a perfect sentiment to end the call on. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for Marie and Dominic from 22D Consulting. I guess they could find you at 22d.tech. Yep, if they have any questions. Thank you.